Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let me pick up where Kim left off because that part of the law dean's letter also stuck out to me. She says law students are entering a profession in which their job is to make arguments on behalf of clients whose very lives may depend on their professional skill. Just as doctors in training must learn to face suffering and death and respond in their professional role, lawyers in training must learn to confront injustice or views they don't agree with and respond as attorneys, unquote. And Alicia, I mean, that is what I find so strange about this episode and others that have taken place at Yale Law School and other places around the country is these are not undergraduates who might be studying everything from math to sociology. These are people who want to be lawyers. They want their stock in trade to be making arguments on behalf of their clients. Some of these people might end up at the Fifth Circuit before Judge Duncan before too long. And the same goes with some of the disdain that I think exists in the legal academy for conservative judicial views, originalism, textualism, reading statutes as they were written, reading the Constitution as it was intended by the founders. I mean, whether or not you agree with that assessment, that legal view, something like half of the federal judiciary does. And by the way, that includes 6/9 of the Supreme Court. And so I don't understand why even people who disagree with that judicial philosophy, if you're doing a law school and your job is to teach students to advocate successfully on behalf of their clients and make a career doing that, I don't understand the lack of balance at these schools.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that they can't separate the law from their own policy preferences. And in many cases, they don't understand that Judge Duncan, whether he's ruling from the bench, he's ruling based on the law. And when he was representing clients in private practice, which seemed to have been some of the students raised objections to the positions he was taking, that he was representing clients. When you go out into the real world and you have to represent clients, you don't always get to pick your clients. Maybe if you go to the Sierra Club, you will become an attorney there, then you get to decide, what cases to take and such. But if you go into the corporate law world, where many of them, if they want to make any money, are going to end up, you're basically handed a case, you're assigned a case, and you have to defend this client or represent them to the best of your ability. It doesn't matter if you actually like them or even necessarily agree with them. Your job is to win cases and represent your clients. And in this case, the students don't seem to think that they should have to represent people or even engage with people whose views they disagree with. And I think that's very troubling, especially if you consider, criminal cases. There are a lot of unsavory people out there, but everyone, under our Constitution has a right to defense. The irony is probably that, many of these students would probably be much more comfortable defending, actual criminals who commit violent crimes than, defending, say, fossil fuel companies or other politically unpopular businesses. But, again, everyone has a right to attorney and due process and a defense. And so it's not just the First Amendment issue at stake that these students don't seem to believe in, free speech. It seems like they don't even seem to believe in the right to counsel.
But Kim, that raises the question, how much of this dynamic do you think is a bubble problem? Students go to Stanford Law. Obviously, they're very smart to be able to get in there. But with few exceptions, they're surrounded. All their professors, with maybe a few exceptions, are pretty progressive. All their peers, their fellow law students, are all pretty progressive. And when people are surrounded only by those who agree with them, they seem to push each other in one direction. And this kind of goes to a broader conversation that has been happening in the country around these campus ideological uniformity. I mean, it raises the question of whether it's bad for education, maybe bad for business, and whether these schools ought to have an incentive to have a more balanced campus.
It's an absolutely huge problem, and that is the source of what's going on. And we've had many conversations here and on the editorial page about the lack of ideological diversity among professors at campuses, some of the attempts at certain universities to change that a little bit, including setting up programs within the university that are designed to invite a different type of speaker. But that's what's so particularly disturbing about Stanford is that obviously the invitation to the judge here had been issued by the Federalist Society branch at Stanford, which of course is a conservative leaning organization. And they can't even tolerate that. They can't tolerate the notion anymore that you can even have some sort of outpost of different thinking that occasionally is allowed to maybe bring in a person that has a viewpoint that's different. So we do have to think about how we fix this and change this. And some prominent conservative thinkers have been engaging this recently, trying to come up with new ideas. Do you try to continue fixing this from within? Do you try to keep trying to grow these programs and push back and hope that you have more law deans at Stanford who get the message and begin to shape up the culture on campus? Do you try to replicate a school like Hillsdale College, create more of those around the country? Do you produce brand new universities that have different thoughts? Do you do what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been doing, which is to sort of intervene a little bit in the way that instruction is dealt with in terms of state universities? There's a lot of different approaches to it, but what I think no one can disagree with anymore is that this is a huge issue, and it's very corrosive to academic cultures, and it's not helping to turn out a future generation of workers and Americans that are going to, add to this society.
Alicia, we'll give you the last word, but does this reflect, do you think, a broader free speech problem in the United States right now? And something Kim said is that, these students, it's not that they just can't stand to have someone with different views come and speak on their campus. And there's something new, I think, about the corrosive language, the corrosive rhetoric people are using about the harm of speech. And I get that people have deep disagreements about fundamental values, but there's often a suggestion that that disagreement is causing people harm, denying people's humanity. That is the kind of language that you heard from the DEI dean, Tyrion Steinbach, in that clip at the top of the show. And I mean, is that part of what's going on here? Is that when people are told to take the view that this opposing speech is harmful, really harmful in that way, it is not just somebody else that has a different viewpoint coming and he's going to give a speech and then he's going to leave, is doing harm to your community, that's at the root of some of this kind of intolerance and protest.
I think so, and I think this has emerged mainly in the academia, but it has bubbled over to other areas of society, and the media has also contributed to this. I mean, you actually read op-eds in the New York Times or in the Washington Post that seem to echo this, and when you have the media, which is, the First Amendment is the bedrock principle for free press, and they're even blaming hate speech for all kinds of societal problems or violence and such, I think that definitely gives at least more legitimacy to the arguments that these Stanford law students or the Yale law students or other are making, that this is harmful rhetoric or that actually cause physical and emotional damage, and which is then used to justify their opposition to free speech.
Thank you, Kim and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow, of course, with another edition of Potomac Watch.